As soon as it hits September 1st, it's Christmas.
September 1st, it's Christmas.
Like our culture is very, very much like a Spanish culture with a mix of Chinese and American culture. So I lived in two different places growing up. We always knew our neighbors. Here, sometimes it feels so isolating that, you have neighbors, but like, you don't even know them. If something happens to you, would they even care?
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Orbital Media Podcast. Now, today we're going to be talking about the Philippines and Filipino culture, what it means to be from that country, what it's like growing up there. And today we're going to be talking to Royce Skidmore, who is originally from that country, but now lives in the United States. Royce, can you tell us maybe a little bit about yourself?
Hi everyone, my name is Royce. I am from the Philippines. I was born and raised there until I was 20 before I moved here. I grew up in the northern side of the country in Isabela, and I was there until I was 10. Then we moved to Cavite, which is like a little south of Manila. So I feel like I basically grew up in Manila because I was always there. But yeah, I moved here to the US about 10 years ago. Um, I've been bouncing around states. I first moved to Arizona, then to New York, mostly New York, and then I'm now here in California.
For people who don't really know maybe much about the Philippines, they've heard about it, but that's about it. Where is it located? Where is the country, and sort of what is it?
Yes, so it is located in the Southeast Asia. Um, it is an archipelago, so if you don't know what that means, that is basically a cluster of islands. Funny enough that I know what I know is we have 7,107 islands, and that's like I know it by heart, but it's funny that this morning I actually Googled it and now it's telling me that there's like 7,600 islands there. And I'm like, what?
Did some of
Yeah,
them sink?
I don't know. I don't know like how that happened, but I guess like, you know, um, I guess there were more islands to be discovered. Um, yeah, but we are Southeast Asian country. We've been colonized by the Spain for 333 years, and there comes the Japanese and Americans, and yeah, that's pretty much
I'll
it.
be curious to talk about that sort of little bit later on. But so that's where it is. What is, and obviously the country's reasonably good size, but for a lot of the country, what's it like living there in terms of the weather and the climate? And when you're outdoors, what is it? What are the seasons like? That kind of thing.
Um, yeah, it's not like the East Coast where we have four seasons. It's mostly very hot and humid, but I would say half the year it's like extremely hot, and half the year it's still hot, but it's rainy. So, yeah, that's just what we have, like the rain and the humidity.
Is it, and does it rain generally? Is it more sort of a winter season rain, or is it more a summer rainy season?
It starts raining like right after summer, so I would say, because I mean, I think they just changed like the summer vacations for like school recently, but when I was there, um, our summer vacation would be like from like end of March to like June. So that's like summer when it's the hottest, and then it would start raining by like June to like whenever. Like we get so many typhoons.
Yeah, once you left the Philippines and you lived in places with very different climates, how you felt that compared to the very tropical weather of kind of your hometown.
Well, it's obviously different because okay, so like after California, after college, I moved to Arizona and I was there for a year, and like I didn't really do a lot of research about Arizona, and I was in Tucson. And I remember waking up the next day because I had a very long flight. and it took me at least 30 hours to get there. And then the next day I woke up and then I saw the land. I saw Arizona, and I was like, "Oh my god! Like, what is this place?" Like, it was so hot, but like, it's a different kind of hot. Like, it's dry. No, in the Philippines, it's like so humid. So, I mean, at least that was different. And then I moved to Washington State, and it was like raining all the time. And I'm like, oh my god, I'm getting exposed to all this. Like, weather and climate. And I'm like, okay. And then I moved to New York, where you know how it is. It's either like scorching hot or you're like freezing to death. And so, yeah, it was an adjustment for me, I think.
When you've run into Americans and you've said, I'm from the Philippines, do people generally know what that means, or have you had to follow that up with, I'm from the Philippines and that means, something?
I mean, I feel like people know because I would say people that would ask me, like, where's that? It's like rare. Like they would know, oh, like I feel like most people that I've talked to and, I've told them that I'm from the Philippines, I would say 90% would know, or 90% have heard of that country. So, yeah.
What kind of people live in the Philippines? My understanding it's a very, very diverse country in terms of different populations, kind of ethnic, cultural groups, languages, all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah, so we do have a lot of islands. Like we have three major islands, and like in each island there are like sub islands, and like we call them regions, which is basically the states. I feel like you know we're pretty much the same. Everyone's the same, but it's like the island where you're from. Like I just don't want to like stereotype like you know
To be like
the
all
other
these people
islands.
from this island, yeah.
No, no. What I'm saying is like I'm from the north. I'm from like the capital area. So you can probably the way I'm gonna categorize it is living there is
Yeah, sure.
like living in New York. You're from New York. So and then the other islands are from like
Right. Right.
Alabama or
Sure. I know, I get what you're saying.
so or, or from
People
like
listening from Alabama, you heard it here.
yeah, or like from Arkansas or yeah, something
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that. Yeah,
yeah.
but and I think every region has their like pros and cons.
I'm actually curious, yeah, about those. So I know a little bit about the islands. There's the big northern one that's called Luzon, right? And that's the one that you've got Manila on. Then you've got the one in the south that's called Mindanao, and there have sometimes been issues there. Um, and then there are like a lot of islands in the middle that are sort of smaller. I think there's like the big one on top, the big one on the bottom, a lot of ones in the middle. There's maybe another one that's like it's like long and thin and it kind of sticks out at an
Yeah,
angle.
that's actually where we
That's
vacation.
about all I know though. Which one?
That's where we vacation last time that when we went home in December. So that strip that you're talking about is still part of Luzon. It is still part of Luzon because it's Region 4B. Yeah, but the middle area, um, I would just say it's Visayas, and that's where Cebu is. Cebu is, and that's where the Philippines was. Um, what's the word? Discovered. So it was discovered by Magellan back in 1521. So, do you know about that stuff or?
Yeah, yeah. So if you want to get into Filipino history, I'll give you a rundown of the basics that I know, and then if you want to kind of fill in and also kind of give me a bit of the perspective on not, not all Filipinos obviously, but like the people that you would have known, what was the general kind of narrative was. So you got the Philippines, you've got people who live on the island. I would kind of think of them as vaguely Southeast Asian, sort of Pacific Islander type people, and kind of very much in that, like, right at almost like a borderline in some ways of their background. Yeah, Magellan sort of sails through. He actually gets killed on the Philippines in like a scuffle with some local guys, if I remember. Yeah, that was a bad. You would not have wanted to be on that expedition. It was not fun. But so yeah, he sails through the Philippines. The Spanish show up not too long after, a couple generations later, because they marked on the map, and they, whatever term we want to use, conquer, colonize, set up a base in what's modern day Manila. I don't know if there was a town there before or if they were just like, the fort's going here. I don't know. They then proceed to conquer, run, the almost all of the islands as basically a colony of Spain, which over hundreds of years, so this is the 16, 17, 1800s, turns the Philippines into a very, very unique place because it's an Asian country. You got some Southeast Asian stuff, you got some Pacific Islander stuff, but you almost develop, and I've used this in a video once, like an Asian Latino identity in some pockets of the country, not everywhere, but in some pockets. The Filipinos, not generally a big fan of Spanish colonization. My sense is the Americans, because of other the Americans show up and they basically take the Philippines as like a war prize from Spain. And then the Americans are basically running the Philippines. And again, curious to get your thoughts on this. Sort of, they're also kind of, colonial people that are running the country. I'm gonna imagine not as bad as the Spanish, but still would be like, we'd prefer to be an independent country. The Japanese then show up. World War II happens. Japanese invade. Japanese are probably way worse than the Americans, and I got some other basis to go off on that, not just a hunch. Where the Filipinos are kind of almost like working with Americans on trying to take the country back. And then pretty much after World War II, the decision sort of made, Philippines is going to be an independent country. And pretty much ever since then, it's been an independent country. Not aware it's had great ties with Spain, though maybe something still exists. And ties with the U.S. have been interesting. I could imagine one narrative is they've been very nice. Another narrative might be we kind of, we've still always thought of the Americans as like they've been in our country and we don't kind of like them and they think that they're, better than us and stuff. So that one seems to be like there are almost different versions of that story, the Filipino-American kind of narrative. And you got a lot of Filipino people who move to the U.S. and especially who live in California and on the West Coast. And in Hawaii, I understand, maybe to a degree. And that's what I got for the super 30,000 foot view of what I know about
Yeah,
Filipino history.
that is right. Yeah, we were colonized by the Spaniards for 333 years. Like everyone would know that by heart for how long. Um, yeah, so and we have a lot of influence of like Chinese because of the barter system. We were trading some goods with the Chinese people, and you know, we have we have so many like Chinese, Filipino Chinese, and actually like my grandma is, I think, has some Chinese blood, but also this is my maternal grandma I'm talking about. So, because like from in the south, there's actually a lot of Muslim Chinese people.
They're Muslim Chinese people. They're not Muslim like, uh, which follow up question, which is sort of the whatever the ethnic group would be that lives in Mindanao. They're like actually. Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and so my grandma from my dad's side, she's actually like from her family is like super Spanish too, and a lot of the last names in the Philippines are Spanish. because we've been colonized for so long that we like our culture is very very much like a Spanish culture with with a mix of Chinese and American culture. So yeah, and like with the Japanese invading us too. Funny story. So my my dad, I feel like he keeps telling me this story when I was younger, how like my grandpa, his dad, like he was in war or something, like he killed all these Japanese soldiers, and his daughters married Japanese guys. So yeah, I have a lot of like Japanese cousins too, and yeah, I mean it's like a melting pot, I would say. Our culture is so diverse. It's like with religion too. Like the southern part, I would say are mostly um, Islam, and I would say the north and like the central would be more Christian because you know it's very like Spanish, um,
Hmm. And specifically very, very, very Catholic.
very Catholic. Interesting,
Yep.
because I am actually not a Catholic, so yeah,
Interesting.
um,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, that
So
would have been one of the sort of. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
no, go ahead. I want to hear this first.
Oh no, I was just going to say that was sort of one of the other things that I would say that I would know about the Philippines, which is the country. Generally speaking, I think of it as an extraordinarily Catholic country, aside from the Muslim population on Mindanao.
Yeah, um, yeah, because with the Spaniards, it's very Catholic. However, like in the north, I would say we're more Methodist, like Christian Protestant.
Okay.
That's like
Okay.
how I grew up. Like that's how I was raised, like religion wise. So, but like I know what they do in the Catholic church or something. Like I would still go to a Catholic church because I find the Methodist like sermon, like the church service, is like so long. So sometimes I would just like go to a Catholic church because it's like 1 hour, 1 hour, and you're done. So I'm like, okay, said my prayers.
Yeah. So and I mean, I will say also, Catholic churches they often are a bit more colorful. They've got a bit more. I don't know. I'm not, in terms of personal conviction, terribly religious, but I do find Catholic churches can be just very beautiful when you're inside of them. Some of the Protestant ones can be a little, they can be a little sparse. And actually, you mentioned
That's
sort of
true.
all of the major diversity in the Philippines, and of course you had the Spanish, you had and the Chinese, but what are some of the other, shall I say, kind of ethnic groups of people that would be considered like Filipino people, or descended from populations that were like pre Spanish?
Pre-Spanish. Um, we have really like the old, like the first people there. I would say would be the Aitas. So they're like physically they're like very short with very very curly hair, and they're like really dark skinned, and I mean they still exist. um I'm pretty sure it's protected by the government. um I'm pretty sure about that. And we also have the Ifugals, and I think they're both in the north, and in the south I think we have Tausug and the Moros, I think. But yeah, I would say the Aitas are like the prehistoric, pre-Spanish people that are still living in the Philippines. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, when I guess I'm curious, the most of the people then, when I think of, because when I think of sort of typical Filipino people, I tend to think of people who will be, generally they look sort of Southeast Asian, bordering to kind of Pacific Islander, and I'm sort of, yeah, curious, like how people see themselves. Like, is there a sense of like that being a set population, or is the sense of, do people generally think of themselves more in terms of just we're Filipinos and there are people kind of from all over and we just, that's who we are? Or is there like a stronger sense of this particular, sort of ethnic cultural group, and like we don't really like this other one, and it makes things in the government very complicated? Because a lot of countries that is the case, but then in other places it's just like, yeah, we're kind of just, we're a big melting pot and we are Filipino and we're kind of Southeast Asian, Spanish influenced people.
I mean, I would think, people there, I think they would just like, acknowledge themselves as Filipino, unless they're from, they're really super proud of like being from somewhere. Because like I have a lot of friends here in the US that are from like different provinces, and like they speak another dialect, and I'm like, oh my god, I don't understand. But like we would just talk in Tagalog, or like sometimes we would just speak in English because it's like easier for us to understand each other. But like, obviously there are places that are, they have like a stronger sense of like, let's say they are from Cebu, like they would like, I feel like they would have a stronger sense of telling people that they meet here, if they're here, that I am from Cebu, I'm Cebuano. So yeah, and I mean, like I would just say I'm like, I'm Filipino. you know, that's just me. Yeah, if they ask like, if they yeah, if they ask me like where in the Philippines, then I would tell them, oh, I'm Ilocano, and because I'm from the north. Um, but
Is
I
that
would,
a province, Ilocos?
um, Ilocos is the province, Ilocos Norte and Ilocos Sur, which means North Ilocos and South Ilocos. But um, but that's the dialect that we um, the major dialect that they speak in that area. So I would just like regard myself as Ilocano.
Is when you talk about dialects, are these ways of speaking that would be maybe not mutually intelligible with Tagalog, but they're very similar, but they're just different ways of speaking and different words? Or are these kind of like completely separate languages that are not at all mutually intelligible with each other? Or is there like a range?
There, I would say there is a range, but no, like my friends here that are from like different provinces, like we wouldn't understand each other. If like, yeah, if like my, let's say my friend David, I think he speaks Ilonggo, and if, or when he speaks Ilonggo with another Ilonggo, then I would be like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, so, but everyone can speak Tagalog. Um, I would say some would probably not be as fluent as I am speaking Tagalog, but because like when you're in the capital area, then you speak Tagalog and English. Is basically our second language, and yeah, I mean, and some people that haven't left their, let's say they're from the south, right? And they still have a Filipino subject, like Filipino class in school. Um, so they still learn like about the national language, and they still learn how to, speak it. However, like that's like saying that I'm trying to learn French, but I don't have anyone that I can talk to in French. So when I hear it, I'm gonna be like, oh my god, what are they talking about?
To go back to the history a little bit, I'm curious. Because you mentioned English, and not only is that because English is a big global language now at this point, and has been getting that way for a while, but even for the Philippines specifically, because of sort of the American control for a couple generations. At least in your experience, when you were kind of living there around other people, what was the general sense and tone of like the Spanish versus the Americans versus the Japanese? In terms of like people's understanding of their history.
Um,
Or I
Spanish
mean, obviously,
wise,
people aren't talking about it like all day long. Like people are still people are still living their lives. But like if it would like come a bit of conversation, yeah.
I mean, I would say that you really can't take the Spanish out from us because a lot of our words are in Spanish. And, like the basic words are in Spanish. Like sometimes, like they would ask you like what's a Tagalog of this and that, but then you say it in Spanish. Like when we're saying how are you, like we would say como está, and people would be like,
Yeah,
what
so
are
it's
you?
literally just that's literally
Yeah,
just Spanish.
and I'm
Yeah.
like it's literally the same. Um, yeah, and even like I think my grandma's family they still speak Spanish. I think there's still an area in the south that still speaks Spanish, like that whole area. Yeah. Um, Japanese, we love their food, but I wouldn't say we were that influenced by it. I think it's mostly Spanish and the American culture that we've really embraced. And yeah, I really think that we love the Western culture and we're super Americanized. So
Yeah, that was another sort of impression I had about the Philippines, that it's compared to really any other country, I would say in East Asia, it is the one where, again, for however, got there, you have a lot more Western influence, like in people's lives and how they almost kind of see themselves versus even like some people like in Vietnam, right? Which again, like it makes the Philippines this very, very, very unique country where it's almost hard for me to kind of lump it in. I mean, obviously, yes, in a lot of ways, it's in Southeast Asia and geographically, and in terms of people's ancestry and stuff by and large, but it does make it a very unique place because of all of these different cultures that have kind of ended up there.
yeah, I think we're very obsessed with the American culture. Um, yeah, especially in the North, it's like, everything is Americanized. And especially that, like I said earlier, that English is our second language because we consider it as a business language. And when you start school, or even at home, it starts at home that you learn the English version of like the words that you use. Like even saying yes and no is, that starts like from home. And then when you start like nursery school up to college, like you have to take all these English classes. And I think, I mean, I feel like I'm lucky enough to be like someone that, you know, likes to read and like speak the language. Um, but also it's because like at school, like when you can when you speak broken English, like people make fun of you. Like people would think that you're dumb because you can't speak straight English. So I don't know why we're like super obsessed with learning English. I don't know. But yeah, I don't know now because like my sister, she's like 13, I think, and she like speaks English like fluently because I mean, I guess her generation is different, but like, with my generation, I feel like you really have to like learn the words. Like, I loved my Webster dictionary, and encyclopedias, like learning words and stuff. So, yeah, it's something about like obsessing, I think, with American culture. I think.
Yeah. Do you think it's maybe a little too much, and that people could have a bit more interest in sort of their own their own language?
Yeah.
If we say their own language, let's count that as Tagalog, because again, I get that that's not even the language of all the islands, but it's the one that's the most spoken. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's the national language. Internationally, it's called Filipino. But actually, it is the dialect that. So I think what happened was there was a voting system where they took out like the most spoken dialects in each area, and then Tagalog was the one that won. And I know they changed it to Filipino with a P, and then because we're so Americanized, they changed it to Filipino with an F. So now internationally, it's supposed to be called as Filipino, not Tagalog.
Oh, interesting. Is that a recent thing? Has that been only in the last couple of years? Um,
No, it's been like that.
oh, it's okay. It's been for a while. It's been for a while. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I feel like you know people just think that it's Tagalog because it is Tagalog. It is Tagalog.
It is Tagalog.
Considered
Yeah. I mean, I've never yeah. Yeah. I've honestly I've never heard people refer to it as for people who at least know, like they've no don't refer to it as Filipino. They refer to it as Tagalog.
Yeah, that's something that I don't know. Like when some I don't know, I just like correct people that now it's internationally called as Filipino, but the dialect is Tagalog. It's fine.
Is still Tagalog. Yeah. That's actually a question in terms of language I have for you, which is I understand with the Philippines, right? You've got that Spanish element of Filipino and Filipina, referring to men and women. And I just want to make sure that I'm sort of clear on the standard rules, like it's the same as it works in Spanish, that you'd refer to a woman as Filipina and a man as Filipino, but then things relating to the culture would just be Filipino, or um, what are like what would your thoughts on like if I referred to you as a Filipina woman?
Yeah, I mean, it's not something that people would take offense of, you know. If you call me Filipino, I'm like, okay, whatever. But it's like saying you're an actor. Because we a lot of our words, even our pronouns, are actually like gender neutral. So it is gender. It's something that actually a lot of the Filipinos that I know here. That's something that a lot of them struggle about. Like when they're referring to people here, like he or she, like they would sometimes someone would say like you know he referring to a woman and vice versa. It's because like when English is like your second language, or let's say English is not your first language, let's put it that way, then I feel like you would be constantly translating it in the back of your head, like you're translating stuff. And a lot of like Filipinos would mistakenly use he or she because our pronouns in the Philippines are gender neutral. Like I don't know, that's like something that I realized recently that I'm like, oh yeah, like we don't refer to like a guy or a woman like a he or she. We just like call them as they are.
Which is similar. It's similar. I didn't learn that until very recently. That's the same in Mandarin, where they just have ta, and it means like them
Or
or like
them,
the.
yeah.
Yeah, it's like no, even in third person, it's like it's just like that person, and it just me, and there is no form of he or she, and so I sometimes hear that too with certain Chinese people in the U.S. where they'll switch like he and she, and then they'll sort of stop and they'll correct themselves. And they're like, I mean, she did the thing, because for that exact reason, like they don't have that designation. It's just ta for the person over there.
Yeah, exactly. And like, so I think the most gender specific words or like names that we have are like when you call your uncle or your aunt. So it's gonna be tito. So it's an O, and tita for your aunt. And then same thing for your grandma and grandpa. It's gonna be lolo and lola. Yeah, and then we have kuya, which is for, a man or like a boy that's older than you or you think is older than you. We just regard everyone as ate or kuya or tito or tita. When you call someone Lola and they're not a grandma, you'd be in
It's very
trouble.
insulting.
Yeah, it's very
Yeah.
insulting.
Tito and tita sound obviously very much like tío and tía from
Yeah,
Spanish,
Tio and Tia.
meaning aunt and uncle. Yeah, it's yeah. I mean, obviously it's a little different though.
With
But
names, the Spanish names that we have, I would say we have that indication, like the O and A's, when someone's name ends with an O. Like, let's say Antonio, and they're a guy. And then we have Antonia, which is like a woman's name. So it's like with names, O and A can, be an indication of like a man or a woman. But other than that, I feel like we are very gender neutral.
to switch from language a little bit, because I always want to talk about this topic, I want to talk about food and Filipino food because I've not had it a ton in my life. I've had it a few times, but I've always immensely enjoyed it. And it was something I knew basically nothing about up until I was in my mid 20s when I had it for the first time. Um, so I would imagine I'm not the only person who maybe is not familiar at all with Filipino food. For the people out there who haven't tried it before, could you give a quick intro to someone who had never had Filipino food before, like what some of it is?
We love food, obviously. It's very influenced heavily by Spanish and Chinese. And the thing about Filipino food is that we don't like dry food, but we do have dry food. But like in the sense of like we love our spices. Like we don't like bland food. It's like it's yeah. Like I feel like every province has their own unique dish, and I mean we cook a lot of like pork dishes, and obviously the rest would be beef and like chicken, but we love pork for some reason, and we have that. I'm sure you've heard of the lechon, like the what do they call that? It's like the roasted pig, like a whole pig.
This was the one that I had the first time, and this isn't a single dish, but it's a whole course, a set of eating, right? It was something called kamayan. For kamayan was the first time I ever had Filipino food. Can you tell people what kamayan is?
Yeah, so kumain is basically boodle fight. So funny because like you do it when there's like a special occasion or like a feast or but it's like something very intimate too, and because you're pretty much sharing it with everyone, so there are like those big banana leaves, and you pretty much set everything like on top of the banana leaf, and there's rice, there are like different dishes, there are maybe shrimp or like barbecue or like salted egg or all the good stuff. But it's something that you do as like I think, an intimate thing because you're pretty much sharing it with people that are very close to you.
Yeah, it's very communal, and you're all kind of sharing from the same dishes, and you're eating with your hands, and there's not sort of the idea of like you get a plate and you sit over. Yeah, it's very
Yeah,
yes, you're shoulder to shoulder with people. So yeah, you would want to do it with people that
yeah,
you're on good terms with.
yeah.
Yeah, it wouldn't
Imagine.
be a good like it wouldn't be like a good like first date type, or like intro business dinner
Yeah.
type situation. You want to
No,
do it with people
definitely not.
you already like.
No.
Yeah. It was also the first time, by the way, Kamine was the first time I ever had balut, which I really liked. I was a big fan of balut.
Oh,
Um, yep. What are your thoughts on balut? And for people who don't know, what would you like to tell them what balut is? Otherwise, I can do it.
you can do it because oh my god, I can't
Okay.
even think of it.
Not a fan. Okay, so balut is basically it is a duck egg, right? It's a duck egg where the little embryo has gestated to the point where it's like becoming a little duck. Like there's a little not living yet creature inside of inside of the egg. Tell me when to stop.
Yeah,
and
it's so like not Filipino of me to like not eat that, but I just like
I
yeah,
just can't stand it.
yeah.
Okay.
Because sometimes I think I tried it when I was like really young, and it was just like traumatic.
Hmm. I mean, you are basically eating a hard-boiled egg with like a little bird in the egg.
Yeah, something like that. But I would. So there is actually another version of that called Penoy, which is basically just a regular egg. So it's basically that without the chick. So I would eat that,
You'd
but
eat that, but
I would
not
eat that. Yeah, no
no,
doubt.
not believe.
But
Yeah,
like
yeah,
the one with the chick, I'm just like, oh my god, you can feel. No, no, skip it.
yeah. I also remember, at least from what I had, there was, speaking of Spanish food, it was pronounced slightly differently, but it was like chorizo, right? It was sort of a red, kind of slightly spicy, but also slightly sweet sausage that I remember too.
Yeah, it's called chorizo. Um, I mean, I guess it depends where you are in the Philippines. I think people regard it as like something else. Or yeah, now I remember. It's either chorizo or longaniza, which basically
That's the
translates.
one I'm thinking of. I'm thinking of longaniza. That's what
Yeah,
it is.
it's pretty much the same. Or I think chorizo is more of like a sausage, and like longaniza is more.
I'm thinking of when as soon as you said it, I realized I was thinking of longaniza. That's what it is. Where it's got like a slight sweetness to it. Yeah.
Yeah. So speaking of food, we have our silogs. So which is it's like a popular breakfast brunch food. So it consists
What's
of
it called again?
it's like the silog dishes.
Silog. Okay.
Yeah. So it's like the suffix of that. So you can so it's C for sinangag, which is like basically fried rice or like version of fried rice, and then log, which means itlog, which is egg, and then your prefix would be um, the other protein that you'd have. Like let's say you want longanisa, the rice and the egg, then you would say long silog. Or the most popular I would say is tapsilog, which is tapa, sinangag, itlog. Tapa is like marinated beef, I think. Yeah. So yeah, that's what I love actually. Um, when whenever my best friend Joy, whenever we would go to our favorite restaurant, Filipino restaurant in Queens when I used to live in New York. Like we would always order the breakfast stuff, but also like order another like lunch dish because you just can't miss it. Especially that one that we always go to. It's like the most, I think, the most authentic Filipino food that we have in or they have in New York.
Aside from food, I'm also another generalization that I would have about people from the Philippines, and I mean this is a good way, is they're very family oriented and they're very focused around um, you know marriage and kids and living in a house and putting a big emphasis on that as a major aspect of kind of their lives.
Yes, we are super family oriented and like we tend to just how would I say it? Like we would live together. Like I remember growing up when we were living in the north in Isabela, like we lived in my grandma and my grandpa's house because and then my uncle was there too And but also because, for some reasons, like so my parents got married at a young age, and like my dad had to like go to Japan to work, and like it was, my mom was so young that we just like stayed at my grandparents' house. And but it's like so common in like every family that like they basically like you're so close and like, you know, so tight that you like if you're the parent, you'd be like, at least I think that this is what they think, that they would be sad to like see you go, so they would just be like, no, just stay here, you don't need to pay for this and that, like if you stay here. And obviously I am not that, I left. And also, yeah, we're super family oriented in a way that um, you like you don't really get to leave home after college. Like I stayed at home during college because like we commuting to work or to school or to anywhere is like so common that I think my school was like about 45 minutes. So yeah, because I was gonna go to school in Manila, and then my dad was like, no. And because I wanted to like do the dorm thing and like be independent, and my dad was like, no. And I'm like, okay. So so I went to a different campus, which is like 45 minutes away, I think. But it's like the traffic is really bad, so it takes longer sometimes. But yeah, I didn't really get to leave home until I decided to like come to the US. And that's something that, as like Filipinos, I feel like, you know, um, you don't really have to leave home until you're like getting married or something. And sometimes people would be married and still, you know, stay at their parents' house. And I just like didn't see that for myself. So
Do you feel that the downside of that, the very, very, very heavy focus on family means that people can be a little stifled in their lives, where instead of being able to get out there and see the world and do different things and, go to the school of your dreams, but you got to get on a plane, that people sort of maybe won't always do that, or they feel they can't do that because there isn't a certain amount of like family guilt of like, oh, my parents don't want me to leave. Like, I guess I'm just gonna stay here.
oh yeah. I mean, I guess I think I am super lucky in the sense of like having very supportive parents that, when I so in the Philippines we're like very big in celebrations, and um turning 18 as a woman, that's like the society welcoming you to womanhood. And I just like I didn't have a party, but like I asked my dad, I'm like, I want to go to the US. And I remember I was in my junior year in college, and I think that thing, like the exchange program thing, was gonna cost about 5 grand. And that's what I asked my dad. I'm like, I wanna go to the States and you're gonna send me to the States. So yeah, I mean, I am super lucky that I have very like supportive parents in a way that like they let me do the things that they probably wish their parents did for them. Um, so yeah, because I get what you're saying. Like I feel like because the families are super close knit, that sometimes there is that guilt that they're like, oh, you're leaving me, or you're like, you can stay here. Like, why are you trying to pursue something that's not here? You know, and sometimes I feel like it gets what's the word? Um, like you literally feel, yeah, it's a little. Oh my god, that is the word. it's a little controlling sometimes with like the elder people, but and then that's when people feel like they're stuck because they're not a, we like my dad was so strict, like super strict, that when I had to like go to a party, didn't even party much. Like when I have to go to like a friend's birthday or like somewhere, like I would have to tell him and ask him like at least 2 weeks in advance. Like that crazy. Yeah, like I would, because like he's super um not like military style, but like like what a father would do, I guess. Like to I know like he was doing it because he wanted to protect me, you know. Um but yeah, at times it felt like I can't do things that I want because my dad wouldn't let me. So that's mostly for like going out and like partying, but like the stuff that he knows that is like gonna be good for me, like future wise, then he's like supportive. But anything that's related, then he would support me. But if it's like going out and just like wasting my time, like partying and stuff, like obviously he's like super strict about that. Like what I said, I would have to ask him like 2 weeks in advance, and then I would have to be in his good graces. Like I would have to do stuff. Yeah. So yeah, that was really hard. But now, honestly, I am super thankful that he did that for me because like that, I feel like that really molded me as an individual and like in terms of knowing what to prioritize.
Well, ideally, that should be part of the growing up process, the maturing process. You're like they're hopefully, assuming they're responsible people. Some of us aren't always as lucky with the parents that we're given, but for those of us who are, like, yeah, we should learn something from them. You mentioned also, partying and events and holidays and things. I'm curious to actually learn a little bit more about that. Obviously, as I say, people are people, so going out's going to involve certain, similar things around the world. And I get that you're different. You were a different age when you were in the Philippines versus in the U.S. But did you notice there were differences in like social life and like how people would party and go out between the Philippines and between the U.S. in your experience?
Yeah, I mean, like with here with the age of drinking legally, I feel like I started drinking when I was like very young age. I think I was in so I started high school at like 12 because we didn't have middle school during my age. Yeah. Wait, can you hear me?
You were okay. That's very. You sorry what?
I started high school at like 12.
Oh, so you were like a child prodigy.
No. Oh yes. But no, it's because we didn't have middle school during my time. I think my sister they have K-12 program now, but their school system is like the US now. But like during my time, it's like nursery, kinder, prep. So that's like from 3 to 6, and then you start first grade at 6. You graduate sixth grade. That's elementary school at 12, and then you go to high school right away. So high school is like 12 to 16.
And then what happens after 16?
You go to college. It's like there's nothing
You
else
go
to
to college.
do but
Oh,
go to
so
college. And so you go to college at like 16 and graduate at 20, maybe 21 for some.
everything, okay. So everything's just 2 years. There's just like 2 years
Oh yeah,
less of. There's no middle school
no,
basically.
at least during my time here.
Yeah, at least during your
But
time. Yeah.
yeah, so like partying, we would always have like parties at home. I would say, like I remember, I I think I was like 15. Like I think the most would be like 14, 16. Um, when someone would like throw a party and we would go after school, or like they would cut the class short. And oh, and by the way, school wise, so I went to a private school, and you really can't leave. It's not like here in the US where you can leave for lunch. It's like we have. This is one thing that, let me just fast forward. This is one thing that I find crazy about the US like school system, because our schools, public or private, we have security guards. You can't just enter the school, which is like, it's so crazy to me, like how, I know I might get political with this, but like, like here, it's like, what are these people doing? Why don't they have like security, like guarding their kids? Because like back home, it's like public or private school, you would have to have a security guard, and you would have to show your ID to like get in. And if you're not wearing your ID, it's like that's like an offense. you know, it's like, what are you doing? And so you know, partying, like I remember classes would be cut short, and obviously you're allowed to go, and like someone would just like throw a random party, and I would go to that party and like try and come home and not look like I drank. So yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, but
it's plenty of. I mean, there were plenty of Americans. I was always a good child when I was, or I
oh
was sort of a socially awkward child when I was sort of 15, 16, 17. So I didn't do a whole lot of that. But there are plenty of Americans who definitely that is part of their high school time.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously it was different in college because in college, like you have more money now, your allowance, and you can go to like bars and stuff. And I would say we're not super strict with like bars and clubs, as long as you show your like college ID. I don't know now with their system. I don't know if like they actually check IDs now, but like when you're in college, it's like you're free to go, free to go party and like go to clubs and stuff.
You also mentioned holidays and events, and I figure, Philippines mostly, highly, highly Christian Catholic country, so I'm sure, Christmas and all that. But still, do you want to talk about holidays and kind of, social events and,
Yeah,
big, big like public festivals that are a big deal?
we, I feel like every province or like every state would have like their own festival. Um, Now that I'm thinking of festivals, what's the most known, most famous festival? I think
Or just like in your, your time growing up there, what were the big calendar events that people were always kind of looking forward
it's
to?
like Christmas and New Year's. It's We don't really have, well, we have Independence Day, but that's like in the middle of the year. Um, so Christmas and New Year are like our big holidays because we're like a Christian, a big Christian country, and we love like we're very family oriented. We love big family gatherings. So as soon as it hits September 1st, it's Christmas. So we actually,
September 1st,
yeah.
it's Christmas.
So we actually have this long running joke. So there's this singer. His name is Jose Marie Chan. He has this very famous Christmas song, which is Christmas in Our Hearts, I think that's the title. But yeah, as soon as September 1st hits, everyone plays that music. Now it's like a joke that everyone just like plays it. So basically, the Burr month, we just refer it as the Burr months. So it's like, oh, Christmas is coming, and September 16th, it's like that marks 100 days before Christmas. So we all know that. so um, we're yeah, we're very big in decorating and gifts and stuff, and like making sure that you honor all the traditions that you have.
Yeah. And now I suppose that's sort of kind of like my last question, which is just very open ended for you, which is like anything you just want to talk about growing up in the Philippines and living there that you especially remember, and it was like something that stands out to you as home, I guess.
Honestly, I think one thing would be being very close to your neighbors. It's like I lived in two different places growing up, but we always knew our neighbors. Like we always celebrated anything that we're celebrating with our neighbors. It's like they are family. We really take that Bible verse that says, love your neighbors. And because I feel like here sometimes it feels so isolating that, you have neighbors, but like you don't even know them. If something happens to you, like, and they're there, it's like, would they even care? Because, like, back home, you know, like, I feel like we just loved and supported each other. That if something would have happened to, like, our neighbor, like, we would be there helping them out, and, like, rescue them or something. So, I feel like that's something that I miss from home. Um, yeah, and also wait, I want to talk about the one holiday, which is New Year's. So like how here Fourth of July is like your fireworks day. So when I was living in New York, um, we would always watch the fireworks, my friends and I, and I was always like disappointed. And then we also have the Paralympics. So in the Philippines,
What's
it's in
the Fire Olympics?
Pyro. So it's called Paralympics. So basically,
Oh, Pyro Olympics. Okay.
yeah. So a lot of different countries like would gather and like compete with like their fireworks. So
Oh, okay, interesting. It's
yeah,
I've never heard of this, the Pyro Olympics. No.
yeah, it's in Manila, and yeah. So they would showcase like their um, musical and firework display. So yeah, like here, this Fourth of July actually I didn't even go out just because, but it's because I'm not drinking, and I don't want to be out with like everyone partying, and I just yeah, but like I could hear it obviously, but I'm like I've seen enough fireworks in my life, so yeah,
So it
yeah,
would be a sort of generalization, but fair to say that Filipinos like their fireworks.
yeah, we
Like
do,
they love their fireworks. Yeah.
we do. But honestly, this past Christmas that I went home, it's so weird. So I was expecting something. I guess with like COVID and stuff, the world changed, and the Philippines is a third world country, and um, during the early COVID years, it the Philippines got really affected by mass deaths and like no vaccines and like no jobs. And it was really sad this past Christmas. I feel like not a lot of people decorated. And yeah, it was just a different vibe.
But it's yeah, no, it is kind of a shame. Yeah, how many holidays and celebrations and festivals and things just got yeah either shut down or just they lost like so much of their energy that they used to have. So, but I mean, I don't know. I'm hoping with at least certainly this year, I felt that COVID as a concept is really like it's finally
Yeah.
like kind of leaving people's consciousness. I mean, there are obviously a couple minor holdouts here and there, but those seem to just be, I think, just individual people and most overall when I'm just around out and about and watching people doing their thing, yeah, COVID is kind of over and done with, and it's just now a thing that might pop up. We deal with it, but it would be nice to think that it doesn't just like cause a damper on all of these holidays going forward, and hopefully next time you visit,
Yeah,
Christmas can still be fun again.
I know.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me, Royce. It's great to also it's great to see you again on the video feed, and it's good to see that you're doing well. It's been quite a while, I know.
I
Um,
know.
but thanks for talking to me about the Philippines. This has been really
I
interesting, and I
know.
love kind of just hearing about kind of your life there and how it compares to the U.S. And everyone else, if you made it this far, either watching or listening, thanks very much. Give yourself a medal, and feel free to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. Like the video, and we'll see you next time. I understand with the Philippines, right? You've got that Spanish element of Filipino and Filipina, and I just want to make sure that I'm sort of clear on the standard rules, like thoughts on, like if I referred to you as a Filipina woman.
Yeah, I mean, it's not something that people would take offense of, you know. If you call me Filipino, I'm like, okay, whatever.